Now, please, Professor Thrift, Vice-Chancellor, University of Warwick.
Well, I should start by, of course, saying thank you for inviting me to this event, and I'm obviously honoured to be here. I should say that I'm Vice-Chancellor of University of Warwick, which now has about 20,000 students, came into being in the first wave of post-war university expansion in Britain, and today I think is recognised as one of the UK's top universities. As a Vice-Chancellor, I've learned that there are three major kinds of internationalisation. One type is what might be called, quite unfairly, feel-good internationalisation. It consists of signing lots of memoranda of understanding concerning teaching and research. And those of us who lead universities are all guilty of this particular kind of internationalisation. Now, of course, the kinds of activity that often result from those memoranda of understanding undoubtedly have their place. The agreements can oil the wheels of student exchange, allow postgraduates and faculty members to meet and discuss research, and establish what are often worthwhile relationships. But many an agreement now lies dormant following the first flush of enthusiasm. The second kind of internationalisation consists of producing overseas operations or branches of universities. And some interesting experiments in that area are undoubtedly going on at this point in time. And these efforts can bring higher education to parts of the world that sometimes desperately need it. Most, quite rightly, have started on a small scale, but are now ramping up. But this kind of internationalisation suffers from one flaw. We might call it a tendency towards trophy internationalisation. By that I mean the intent of receiving countries is often to produce an instant boost to their reputation and expertise. So too often they tend to concentrate on the usual suspects, the most prestigious brand name universities, luring them in with promises of buildings and financial support in a kind of reverse imperialism. The final form of internationalisation consists of networks, and we can find many examples of those kinds of ventures, usually consisting of somewhere between 10 and 30 partners. For example, Universitas 21, which Tec Monterrey is a part of. At their best, they give the partners a platform on which to build interesting forms of cooperation, especially in areas like student exchange. At their worst, they can provide a sense of international involvement and inclusion without doing much except making dents in the travel budgets of presidents and provosts. Something has, I think, been missing from all of these forms of internationalisation, and I think that's really deep engagement between like-minded members of a global higher education community. This kind of engagement is immensely difficult to achieve, and yet we have to achieve it. If you think about the state of the world as it is now, climate change and so on going through, we may be in the last 40 or 50 years of human life as we actually know it. And I think in 40 or 50 years' time, our ancestors may look back and say, so what were universities doing at this point? Were they really collaborating on what must almost be thought of as a kind of war footing? So what I want to discuss is really internationalisation, its impact on cultural relations under three themes. Every student is an international student, institutional partnerships, and new approaches to philanthropic engagement. And in doing that, I'm going to take Warwick as the example, but that's only to, in a sense, underline just how small some of the achievements actually are that we need, that we have, and how big the achievements actually need to be. So, let's start then just with every student as an international student. One of the overarching goals of Warwick is to establish Warwick as an international portal. And we've discovered, as I'm sure other universities have, that when you get to about 25% foreign students, that's excluding EU students, which we don't regard as foreign. Well, most of the time we don't regard as foreign. There is, I think, a real issue because the nature of the institution changes inexorably at that point. And you have to think very carefully about what it is that you are actually doing. What we've tried to do at Warwick is therefore think about how we're actually trying to prepare our students as international citizens, as global citizens. We've done that in all kinds of ways, and I won't go into most of them. But for example, a couple. We've established what we call the Warwick Global Advantage Award. And we've done that because at Warwick, most people, most students, in some way or the other, are volunteering into the community. And what we're trying to do is actually reward that kind of volunteering which is making a difference at the global scale. So that award is given to about 40, 50 students each year to try and, if you like, produce momentum. A second example is One World Week, an annual event run by students of the university designed to promote cultural awareness and action on global issues. It's been going about 15 years now, and it's now, in fact, the world's largest student-run cultural event. And again, very interesting in all sorts of ways. My second theme is of institutional partnerships. At Warwick, what we've tried to do is actually try to work towards very deep collaborations with just a few universities. This has proved extraordinarily difficult, and it's not unfair to say that it's taken us already around 3 years to get to actually establishing the level of trust you need to actually produce this kind of interaction. But we are now building deep relationships with universities in the United States, in Australia, and in India. And that means engagement at all levels of the university, with faculty members, of course, with students, of course, but also with administrators. And it's taken longer than we thought, but we've learned a lot along the way. For example, we now know to always choose new areas in which to cooperate to avoid turf wars. We know that some of the most valuable cooperation will be around shared remote access to high-end scientific equipment that only one partner has. So we've really found that time zones are extraordinarily important because, for example, we're now able to use the scientific equipment of our partner in Australia, and that partner in Australia can use our scientific equipment. We can just use it remotely using our computer networks. We know that interaction needs to be continuous and initiated by both sides equally. But we also know we've got an awful long way to go. But what we're heading towards at time, if we can get it right, is a kind of holding company merger. In which what we will do is become part of really a very close-knit network of 4 or 5 partners only. The final theme I thought I'd explore is that of new approaches to philanthropic engagement. Mindful to avoid the tag of critics of modern-day imperialism, Warwick's been trying to think of new approaches in its engagement with the developing world. One of the things about Warwick is it has one of the best maths departments in the world. And we started thinking about what we could do about that. And what we've done is that all undergraduates are now given the opportunity to go to Africa to teach mathematics. And this is an extraordinarily simple idea which has been extraordinarily successful. And the reason is because the talent for mathematics is equally distributed around the world. There's no doubt about that. In every community in the world, there are people who are brilliant at mathematics. And what you need to do is find them. And we have been able to do this, actually, mainly as a result, in fact, almost entirely as a result of philanthropic donations. From alumni and friends of Warwick, from Barclays Capital, from a whole series of sources, and that is producing ways out for talented mathematicians in Africa of the situation in which they find themselves. It's an extraordinarily simple idea which works extraordinarily well. So in summary, the challenge facing all universities is that they are global public goods, but of course they're run along national lines and funded on the whole along national lines. Some way or the other, we have to find our way around that particular conundrum, and that must mean closer, more effective means of collaboration. I'll stop there.